Hey everyone, and welcome to the PHILLIP Show. Thank you so much for joining us today. So listen, we all know that there's a huge disconnect between the church and the LGBTQ plus community, and that disconnect it's really large enough, and it leaves people feeling very ostracized and displaced. Our guest today is a pastor and an LGBTQ plus advocate, and is bringing his outspoken perspective to that conversation. So please help me welcome to the PHILLIP Show, Vincent Brown. Vincent.
Hi, thank you so much, Philip, for having me. It's really an honor to be able to speak on your platform. And just before we start, just seeing the intro, that was really nice. You're just really investing. I'm just so happy to see everything progressing and growing like it is.
Thank you. I really appreciate that, and I'm super excited to have you here. Just so the people out there know, you guys, we've been trying to connect and get Vincent on the show for a long time. So I'm super excited that we're here. So for you, where did your journey begin, and how did it lead you to becoming a pastor of an affirming church?
Well, interestingly enough, I think it wasn't such a significant difference than just being a pastor in general. As I actually knew that God was calling me to do affirming work prior to me becoming a pastor. I just didn't have the understanding, the resources, the tools, or even the confirmation if I was clear on what I heard from God. But I went to Bible college. I went to World Harvest Bible College in Columbus, Ohio. And it is a very conservative evangelical Bible college. And so we were there, and, I just having prayer and just different things like that. And I knew when God called me to start my church, he gave me a very interesting name. He said, your church will be called The Outlet. He says, and the people need an outlet. They need a place of empowerment. They need a place that will be safe, a place that will be for the outcast. And God specifically told me, he said, you will be a shepherd of the black sheep, the rejected, and those who are not safe or accepted everywhere else. And he told me this. He said, and you will have a specific call to the LGBTQIA plus community. Now, given my upbringing, I'm a fourth generation Pentecostal holiness background. And so in the way that we were taught and believed, I just thought that, I said, okay, well, God loves everybody, the same stuff that we hear everybody else saying. And it was like, he's going to send them. But I was so opposed. I was very, very opposed to God sending me LGBT people, primarily because I was struggling with my own identity.
Got it.
I was struggling with my own acceptance. I was struggling with wanting to be affirmed by my family and my church. And I knew the stigma that came with association,
Okay,
so
so let me let me ask
I'm battling that.
Yeah. So let me ask you, when you said that, were you a part of the community prior to accepting the call and hearing that was going to be kind of your flock, or were you saying you were still dealing with, number one, accepting it yourself, or other people accepting? Where were you in the process when you said yes to this call?
Oh my goodness. So I was in and out. I had just moved away from home. I'm originally from Georgia. So I really didn't understand a lot of things about the community or just different things like that, because, you kind of think sex is just something you do. You don't really identify sexually in a conservative background because it's not something you talk about. So if it's something that's a secret, if it's something that's very private, and I'm not talking about just same-sex attraction, sex in general is a very taboo subject in Southern Black families, especially Christian ones. And so, it's just not something you're just talking about in general. It's something that people think that's what goes on in private in your bedroom. So you don't identify a community around something like that because no one else is identified. And those who are are seen as perverse, and they're seen as flamboyant, they're seen as alternative, stuff like that. So I didn't really see myself in that community in that way. I thought that I was like, well, that's just something I did. Um, that wasn't something that I said who I am, because how we was brought up, it was like, I'm going to be delivered. That's a sin. That's a demon. That's my struggle. And so, I was torn by that. And so when he told me that, I was just like, well, God, I want a wife and I want kids. And I just want, the regular family, the things that you think you're supposed to have, because it's sad when you, in retrospect, it doesn't make sense. But when you're in it and you haven't processed and filtered through all that stuff, you've suppressed it so long that you actually identify more with your suppression than the authenticity of what you're attracted to or how you see yourself, because you don't see yourself yet. You weren't allowed to see yourself. You were given an image and said, this is who you are. This is what you're supposed to be. So you've kind of conducted yourself according to that. So stepping out of that is a whole, paradigm shift of like, well, who am I? So
I would imagine too.
The short way is just like, no, I didn't know where I fit.
Yeah. I think in those situations too, I think one of the things that would also be challenging is the fight against that, because you knew that you were told that you can't be that.
Right.
So after you decided, you're like, okay, I have my own personal journey. I know that God is calling me to this.
Mm-hmm.
What was your next step, and how did you transition from searching, number one, for yourself, to establishing this church for a community?
Well, I just started the church, and I did not associate it with anything sexual, anything gender specific or non-binary or anything. It's just, I just started the church, and I was just like, I know what God said about that, but I thought he was telling me to come out just to share my testimony like Donnie McClurkin, and then say I got delivered. So it was really complicated, because like I said, I had no context for what I knew God was telling me to do personally. And it just took a lot of mistakes. It took a lot of research. It took a lot of me hurting people, being deceived. I became deceptive in order to exist in those spaces that required lies. We're very critical of people in the closet, or what we say down low, but we never created a reality for them to tell the truth. So long story short, what really prompted or expedited was the fact that I fell in love. And so falling in love challenged me to question so much. I kept saying, God, I don't understand what makes love evil. I don't understand, like, why does a chromosome determine my eternal state, whether I'm going to heaven or hell? Like, why is that such a big deal? Why is it like, I did not understand, if this thing that we were doing was spiritual, why is so much emphasis put on the flesh? You see what I'm saying? It's like we keep saying this is a spiritual work, but everything that we're talking about is natural, it's carnal, it's fleshly, and that's the part that they said is not going to inherit the kingdom of God. So So that was the catalyst of my research, was love.
Wow. So, okay, so you fell in love. You opened this church. Now, how long has your church been in existence?
Before I came out?
Period. Like, how long you opened it
in general. Today? Oh, since 2008. Yeah, I've been pastoring. I started my church in 2008.
So in 2008, now you have your congregation, and I would assume, for people out there who may not know, when a church is affirming, what does that mean?
What that means is that your church has created space for you, and intentional space that we have created acceptance according to theological proof, that we've taken the Bible and we've shown you that Christ accepts you, that not just we accept you, that heaven accepts you, God accepts you, and that in our church, it's not just, we have a lot of welcoming churches that are not affirming churches. I mean, you go to churches all over, you see the gays are running the church, but they can't be honest about it. They can't be authentic about it. They won't marry you. They won't allow you to serve if you're open and out and proud. They will not allow for you to have a space without condemnation. So that is the difference in an affirming church. Is it's not a don't ask, don't tell church. You know, it's a lot of people know that who you are, and we're just not going to say anything. But we're very intentional about being vocal and visible in our acceptance and how we treat you and affirm you.
Wow. So you're not just a pastor, you're what's considered a bivocational pastor. So you have your church and you're still an advocate outside of the church. What do you do outside of the church?
Just in the community, I serve on various boards. I serve on the board of directors for an organization called Jasmine, and that is here in Jacksonville, Florida, that we serve the LGBTQIA plus community for young people, for youths, teenagers and young adults. We provide resources for them to get tested for HIV so that they can get housing, so that they can get treatment, so that they can get food, so that they can find community. I serve on an organization on the board too in Florida called Faith and Public Life. It's a national organization, but I work with the Florida division. What we do also is it is a political organization that goes and does activism and campaign for so that we can get laws passed that make us safe legally, politically, all that kind of stuff, and from a faith-based organization. And I work in the HIV community, and I am a tester, and I'm HIV tester and a counselor. So I do a myriad of things in the community. But yeah, it all kind of overlaps in the same community, though.
Yeah. Why are you so passionate? All of these things, like you said, they all overlap. Why are you so passionate about giving back and being outspoken and being someone who is doing for and throughout the community?
Well, that's a good question. My passion is rooted in who I needed when I was that age. And I just wish that I had someone who was speaking up for me, who was teaching me, who helped me navigate some of the most difficult times in my life. I went through a time where I felt, I battled with suicidal thoughts. I prayed and I asked God, we will have these fiery revivals. And I mean, you could feel the power of God in there, and we'd be praying and all that kind of stuff. And so in my mind, my young mind, I'm just like, okay, God, I'm right now. Oh, my spirit is right. I'm on fire for God. I'm purged. Just take me now before I mess up, or before I have an evil thought, or before, and all of that kind of stuff is so toxic. Listening to that theology and hating myself. They used to teach us hate the sin, love the sinner. But when you're dealing with something that has been demonized, that is a part of you, and it's not an action, but it is an identity, you end up self-hating yourself too. And I had to unlearn so much stuff throughout my theological and my faith deconstruction so that I could not only learn how to love other people, but love myself. And because of dealing with that kind of stuff in our families, it isolates you. It makes you afraid to ask for help or resources, and you're ill-equipped when you're going out. And I just want to tell this story. When you go through sex ed and school, they're only telling you about when they talk about the birds and the bees, they're talking about girls and boys. They don't never talk about the birds and the birds or the bees and the bees. It's just like there are variations. And so you get out there and you don't know who to talk to about having the same-sex attraction, or how to prepare yourself, or how to use protection, or what communities to avoid, or things to look for in different circumstances or scenarios. My youngest brother, he passed away in 2016, from complications related to HIV and AIDS. And you know, and I saw him shrivel up. I saw he was a very beautiful young man, and I just saw him just decline so rapidly. And he was very secretive about it. He never told us, you know. And I knew when it got to a certain point, but you know, he was doing sex work. He was working in the porn industry, and he was just doing different things that you know, and that crushed me, that he didn't have anybody to talk to. And so when people would ask me, they say, what did he die from? I said, stigma. Really? He didn't. He would be alive if he had a support system that was educated, that didn't make him feel shame, that didn't make him feel weird, or that his life or his love or his sexuality, you know, was just so perverse that it wasn't human. And that pushed me into not only affirming people their sexuality, but to also help them navigate it. Because HIV is a very real thing in our community, and it's not exclusive to our community, but it is very prevalent in our community. And we only talk about it and using fear, but I had to educate myself on it. Yeah. And that's what made me passionate about becoming bivocational, because I don't. He came to me, and we was on my mom's porch, and he was like, Vince, I just want to make sure I'm going to heaven. I said, Chris, you know, you asked me to pray with you before. He was like, just lead me. And so I led him in the prayer, and he prayed. He gave his life to God like 10 times before he was about. I'm just like, you're good. But you're not convinced when that stuff has been drilled in your head. Yeah, you're not. So, you know, we prayed and we prayed and we prayed over and over, because he just wasn't convinced enough that he was worthy. And so I wanted to do more than just make sure I was saving souls. I wanted to also make sure I was saving lives.
Within your work, I know that in the national conversation, and international conversation, it's very clear that there's still a lot of work to do around transgender rights. And it seems like understanding, what do you think that everyone is missing, and why is it such an ordeal?
Oh, wow. I would say I've heard people say things, and I can't speak for everybody, but I can just reiterate some things that I've heard that was just very harmful to trans people. And one in particular, people say stuff like, God makes no mistakes, and you're changing who God made you, and when you die, you're gonna go to heaven, and God made you Stephen, and you're gonna come here Stephanie, and he's not gonna know who you are, and you know, you're gonna be at the gate, and he ain't gonna let you in. I've heard this kind of ignorant stuff, and I'm just like, first of all, God is not a moron. God is not God. You said that God is omniscient and all-knowing. Why wouldn't he know? He was there not only through your conception and birth, but your process. And the thing about that is, David said when they were trying to choose who was going to be the next king, and they were asking, they was looking at all David's brothers and all of the ones who they felt was more qualified. And in the Bible, and when Samuel was getting ready to anoint, the Lord spoke to Samuel and said, man looks at the outward appearance, but not God. God looks at the heart. And until we could understand that God is more concerned with our heart than our parts, and that we can stop thinking that people aren't going to heaven because we didn't vote for them to go there. And as I opened up this text like I'm preaching, as I opened up this interview, saying that flesh and blood, this is what we preach, will not inherit the kingdom of heaven. So why are we stuck on that? If the flesh and blood we said is not what's going to inherit the kingdom, why are we limiting people from the kingdom because of it?
I never heard that perspective.
Yeah. If anything, if you're talking about someone's gender, is a self, it's a social construct, and it's how you perceive yourself. It's not talking about your anatomy. Your gender means a boy should wear blue and a girl should wear pink, and let's say a female should wear pink and a male should wear blue, and a female should be girly and a male should be masculine and a boy, and all that kind of stuff. That is just social constructs we created to identify sex. And so none of that kind of stuff is in the Word of God for what we have to do to make it to heaven. And so how you identify, how you present, has nothing to do with how you love each other, how you love God. That's just a presentation. That's just a self-identity. That is not talking about your character and how you're going to, be with. That's the main thing. If we keep the main thing, it's so much more simpler.
Who's that over there?
Be in the interview so bad. Okay.
It's okay. But right, keep the main thing. In your perspective, I know we talked about the need for mentorship and role models, but having that overlap with ministry as well as working within the LGBTQIA plus community, what would you say is one of the biggest needs that you see in both areas?
One of the biggest needs as it pertains to mentorship?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I would say when you start realizing that we're merging communities openly and vocally and visibly that they've always been pitted against each other. Anytime you see go all the way like talking back like George Bush when they were doing the elections back then, they were saying, they were like, how does the African American community feel about the LGBT community trying to get rights before the African American community actually get the rights, and like that there's this divide as if African Americans aren't LGBTQ or LGBTQ people aren't African American. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So it's and that has been a narrative that we think come from the Black community. But a lot of that kind of stuff is just been pitted against each other. And so we haven't really seen representation in that regard. We haven't seen people doing all of those things and being vocal and being visible and having, representation. And so we have to get to the place that we're saying now, how do we navigate and pioneer, this new frontier, because we don't have representation. We don't have, many of us who are doing this work this is the first time it's ever been done. This is the first time it's ever been seen. So I was listening to John Legend one day, and the song said, "If you're out there," and he said, "I searched for a leader, and the leader was me." Sometimes we have to take the risk of being the first. And so, we don't have as much representation, but the ones that we do have, we have to learn how to stick together, undergird, support, financially undergird. I noticed that a lot of people who the work is for aren't, supportive of it. So we have to really get behind the people that are doing it, even if they're making mistakes along the way because it's new.
What would you say is one of the biggest misunderstandings of the LGBTQIA plus community? When people are viewing it, what would you say is one of the biggest misunderstandings?
Oh my goodness, there's so many. But I would just my own observation would be just the hypersexualization of the community, thinking that it's some type of a deviant, perverse, just all of those terms are usually even the church, they're always calling it a spirit of perversion. Like there's something twisted and nasty, and it's almost like they hypersexualize us in their imaginations and fantasies more so than what we're even living. And so they don't see you as just brothers and sisters and parents, teachers, preachers, just contributions to the community. Their mind goes straight to your bedroom and sexual acts. and they don't even consider the fact of how many people are questioning and are abstinent. Everybody's just an attraction is not the same as an action, and just that would be something that I wish that people could see, because when you think of a heterosexual person, they have a sexuality and sexual identity, but you're not just driving that in about what they do sexually to define who they are as people.
Yeah, that's really good. Now, do you have to, because I know that stereotype can be believed by both parties. So have you come across people within the community that have adopted that and think that that's what they're supposed to be like?
I'm sure. Well, that's just in human nature in general. And my point is not to take away or demonize people who are sexual, because you have agency. You have the right to do what you want to do with your body, or with your partner. My point is dangerous generalizations of entire communities based off of the actions of some who choose to do whatever they choose to do as an adult. And that we should just be a little more careful in how we make stereotypes out of people because of what you want to portray in the media, or if you have an agenda that you're trying to do. Like if your whole point is to put out a certain narrative, then you'll try to find that one thing. Like they do that a lot with trans women, that they're trying to trick men. You see what I'm saying? That's dangerous. Trans women or trans men, trans people are just trying to live their life and live their life in the identity and live that truth of who they are. They're not out trying to trick anybody. You know what I'm saying? But that's one of those dangerous generalizations that they do.
For people who want to hear more of your platform or want to connect with you and your church, where can they find you?
I have sermons and interviews and teachings on YouTube, and you can look up the Outlet Church, and even on there I have playlists where if you just want to hear just regular sermons, just on just Jesus, so that's there. But I do have a playlist that's called Affirming Theology. If you just want to hear me break down scriptures and just get a clear understanding, you can go there. I'm on Instagram at Vincent R_Brown, and my handle is the same for Twitter, and it's the same, and you can go on Facebook, but I'm mainly on Twitter and Instagram. So, and I interact.
Yeah, you do.
Yes,
you do.
I'm very interactive.
You definitely do. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, and for your platform and being so transparent with your journey and how you got where you are and what you're doing.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm really glad to be able to share tonight. I appreciate you giving me this opportunity to share your space with me.
Thank you to our guest, Vincent R. Brown, for coming on the show and sharing his passion and his journey and his story. Listen, there is still so much work to do. So for all of you out there who are still looking to make an impact, to make a difference, the opportunity is still available. Thank you so much for joining the PHILLIP Show today. And remember that you are the best you in the world. We'll see you next time.
Don't